Everything you've been told about the Great Blizzard of 1888 is a lie, or, at the very least, a sanitized version of the bone-chilling reality that left an entire nation paralyzed under 20 feet of snow. We are taught that it was a natural disaster, a freak act of God that caught the East Coast off guard. But for 11-year-old Abby Sage, standing on the edge of a frozen New York City street, it wasn't just a storm, it was a sentence of exile. Imagine a world where the air doesn't just feel cold, it feels like it's made of razor blades, where the wind screams with such a human-like pitch that you start to believe the shadows moving in the whiteout are ghosts coming to take you home. The story begins in a drafty boarding house on Lexington Avenue, where Abby lived under the watchful, often cruel eyes of a society that didn't believe children should have imaginations. When Abby ran inside, her boots caked in a strange, grayish slush, claiming that the sky was closing its eyes and that a wall of white was moving faster than a steam engine, the adults laughed and called her a liar. They told her the Weather Bureau had predicted a mild spring rain, that the yellow sky she saw was just a trick of the white, and for the sin of spreading fear and lying about the coming doom, she was cast out, told to go stay with a distant relative across the city as a lesson in humility. But as she stepped out into the afternoon air, the temperature didn't just drop, it plummeted like a stone into a well, crashing from a balmy 40 degrees down to zero in a matter of hours. This wasn't just a storm, it was the Great White Hurricane, and Abby was now a small, lonely figure moving through a city that was rapidly disappearing beneath a shroud of ice. She wasn't just running from the cold, she was running toward a realization that would eventually lead her to design a structure so sturdy, so ironclad, that it would change how we survive the impossible. As the sun vanished behind a curtain of blinding white, the streets of Manhattan became a labyrinth of death, where horses froze mid-stride and the L trains became elevated tombs for hundreds of commuters. Abby found herself trapped between 23rd Street and a future no one believed was coming, holding a secret about a sealed home that would one day save the very people who called her a fabricator. You have to wonder, as the frost began to bite her cheeks, did she realize that the lies she was punished for were actually the only truths that mattered in a world about to be buried alive? Why was this 11-year-old girl the only one who saw the iron home in her mind, while the rest of the world saw only a grave of snow? Stay tuned, because what she did next defies every law of survival. The wind was now howling at 80 miles per hour, a relentless physical force that threw Abby against the brickwork of a building near Union Square, and it was here, in the heart of the chaos, that the iron home began to take shape in her mind. While grown men were collapsing into snowdrifts, their lungs crystallizing from the sheer intensity of the freezing air, Abby found a small alcove, a space between two massive iron pillars of a construction site. She realized in that moment that wood was a lie, that brick was porous, and that the only thing standing between a human soul in the crushing weight of a blizzard was the sealed iron she had seen in the shipping yards. She remembered the way the great boilers of the steamships stayed warm, even when the Atlantic was tossing ice over the decks, and she began to crawl, not toward a house of wood, but to the industrial skeletons of the city. The location was grim. The telegraph wires had snapped and were hissing in the snow like electrified snakes, killing anyone who touched them. Yet Abby navigated the death zone with a strange, calm clarity. She found shelter in a half-finished warehouse owned by a man named Silas Thorne, a man who would later testify that he found a frozen angel sitting perfectly still inside a cast-iron cylinder. Abby hadn't just found a hiding spot, she had utilized the principles of thermal insulation and dead air space, concepts an 11-year-old shouldn't have understood, but one she had mastered out of necessity. She sealed herself in using heavy canvas and iron scraps, creating a microclimate that defied the sub-zero temperatures raging just inches from her face. Outside, the city was dying. Over 400 people would lose their lives in those 72 hours. But inside her iron cocoon, Abby was sketching on the floor with a piece of coal, designing a home that could breathe without letting the cold in. She wasn't just surviving, she was proving that the lying girl had a vision for the future of architecture that the experts in their warm offices had completely missed. But as the third day of the storm approached and her meager rations ran out, the iron home she built became a potential coffin as the snow piled so high that the air inside began to thin. She had built the perfect shield, but she had forgotten one thing. How do you get out when the world above you has become a solid block of ice? When the sun finally broke through the clouds on the fourth day, New York City looked like an alien planet, a white wasteland where the only signs of life were the tops of street lamps poking through the drifts. Search parties began the grim task of digging out the lost, expecting to find only corpses, but when they reached the side of Silas Thorne's iron warehouse, they heard a rhythmic thumping coming from deep beneath the snow. They dug through 15 feet of packed ice until they hit metal, and when they pried open the iron cylinder, out stepped Abby Sage, pale but very much alive, clutching her coal-smudged sketches of the sealed iron home. The news of the lying girl who outlived the blizzard spread like wildfire, reaching the very boarding house on Lexington Avenue where she had been exiled. The people who had cast her out were forced to reckon with the fact that her imagination wasn't a sin, it was a blueprint for the modern age. Abby's designs for reinforced, insulated structures eventually influenced the way we build in extreme climates today, moving away from drafty timber to the iron homes that keep us safe in the face of nature's fury. She proved that the truth doesn't care if people believe it, it only cares if it's built on a foundation that can't be broken by the wind. This story reminds us that the voices we often dismiss, the dreamers, the children, the liars, are often the only ones seeing the storm before it hits. Abby Sage didn't just survive the blizzard of 1888, she conquered it, turning her exile into an empire of safety. Her story was buried by history for years because it embarrassed the authorities of the time, but the iron remains. If you found this deep dive into the hidden corners of history fascinating, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story that the history books tried to forget. We are uncovering the truth every week, one frozen mystery at a time. But tell me in the comments, if you were cast out into a storm like that, would you have the strength to build your own way home, or would you let the snow have the last word?